Hi, everybody. Welcome to our 7th Beyond Brooks. Super excited to be here. Format's going to be a little bit different today. We've always had a product partner and included their product in our box. But this product's a little bit more intangible than that we're going to do today. Hopefully everybody watched the movie last night and enjoyed their Quinn popcorn, which is a beautiful box for sure, and enjoyed it. I'm excited to hear what everybody thinks about the film. I am just still on cloud nine, inspired by it, and feel so lucky that this is just one of those blessings that I have as one of the gifts I've gotten from being a part of Brooks is being able to meet people like Ryland, who's going to join us today. So excited for our afternoon together. We have a couple of special wines. Those were not Brooks labeled wines in your box that you received. And we're going to talk about that partnership a little bit, but that is a custom label that we did for Kiss the Ground. So super proud of that. Today is the very first day they are being debuted. They just went up on our website today, and you are the first to drink them and try them and to have received them. So thank you for being part of Beyond Brooks. As always, we need to start our event with a toast. So if everybody wants to raise their glass, whether you have your white or your red, and we are going to toast to continually live through the lens of others' passions and connect with our community and with their craft. Cheers. And that, of course, is the whole premise behind Beyond Brooks, is working with people within our community. And I think the easiest way to tie it together is to talk about the proceeds that we donate to as part of this program. I think everyone knows that we're members of 1% for the Planet. And with that, we donate 1% of our gross revenues every year to an environmental-based nonprofit. And what's really interesting about that is 1% for the Planet has hundreds, if not thousands, of environmental-focused nonprofits in their portfolio that we as a member get to choose from. And when we first went through that process, I worked with our membership director, and she, proposed a whole bunch of things. She's like, do you want to support somebody with your funds that's local, someone that's just domestic? Do you want to go international? Do you want it to be, about replanting trees? Do you want it to be about the ocean? Like, the choices were endless. But they really help you define what your true purpose and mission is, and select some of those companies for you to take a closer look at. So I had a list of about 10, started going through some different websites, and one of them was Kiss the Ground. And as I was reading, I thought, wow, they have such an education focus, which is always so important to everything that we do at Brooks. And they're really, really doing good work. And so I made a couple of phone calls and ended up talking to them and found that, similar to me in my role, not being a winemaker, they're not farmers and scientists, at least the founders and Ryland that you're going to meet today, but they have an important message. And so through education and different media channels, they are really trying to make a difference. So we selected them. I ended up selecting them as our only partner. So this is our second year working with them, and it's just been, I really wanted to pick one partner because I wanted a deep relationship. We've already done some really cool things together. I'm really, really excited to share more about Kiss the Ground with you today. So excited for that. I want to bring up Bree Stock, who, if you've been on Beyond Brooks before, of course you know her. Bree is my dear friend. She is a master of wine. It was her and I's brains put together that came up with this concept of Beyond Brooks. She does all the education for the Oregon Wine Board, puts on one of the largest symposiums in the country, is a winemaker herself, so she really understands the process of making wine, of farming, appropriate farming. So between the two of us, we're super, super excited for this topic today. So Bree, I'm going to bring you on up.
Thanks, Janie. So happy to be here. And yes, I am fangirling just a little bit today because, you all know that I'm from Australia. I have that funny accent. And I had people from Australia reaching out saying how amazing this movie was and really, pushing me to watch this movie. And I responded with, well, here we go today in Beyond Brooks, and wish you guys were over here because I actually get to chat to the founder and the amazing change maker, which is really part of the conversation that we're all trying to have here. So thank you, Janie, and thank you for being so visionary and inspiring and running with our ideas as we create them and discuss them. I'm going to very quickly run through just some housekeeping for everyone. So if you do have any trouble today with your screen slowing down or getting stuck or dropping off, just hit the little refresh button up in the top corner. It's the little arrow in the circle, and hit that a couple of times and you should be brought back to the stage, or be brought back to the room so that you can see us all. If you do have any trouble, just pop it into the help screen and we'll be able to get you through that. Also, please be very active in the chat and question and answer section. We rely on all of your feedback, and that's part of what, really founded and spurred Beyond Brooks, was that Janie and I could connect with you all. And so please make sure that you just chat with each other in the chat, and then in the Q&A, if you have questions, put your questions in there and vote on them, and those questions will come to the top. So we know they're the most important, that everyone has the burning desire to know about. So put those questions in there and click on them and vote on them. So upvoting, it's called. And then if you are on an iPad or an iPhone, you won't really be able to have much interaction with the Q&A and the chat. We do have a lounge section afterwards that we all go into, and we chat with each other, or chat with all of you. So Janie will have a lounge, Ryland will have a lounge, and I will have a lounge. So come on in and say hi and have a chat and a catch up. And that's at the very end, but you can only do that from a computer, not an iPad or an iPhone. Today we are going to go through Ryland's story. That's going to be the most important conversation that we're having today. And we'll also talk about how Brooks work with the principles of regenerative farming here in the Willamette Valley and across Oregon, and why it's important to them. So we'll make those connections through there. You're welcome to start drinking if you didn't drink your wines last night with the movie and at the screening. Please have a glass now while we're listening to Ryland tell his story. And then at the very end, we're going to bring Janie back up, and she's going to chat about the wines, and we'll walk through the wine tasting. And I want to hear from you what you're tasting. The white blend is delicious. I can see Jody saying that in the chat. And I agree, it is definitely a favorite wine that I've had in the Beyond Brooks so far. So come and join us in the lounge at the end. Have 2 glasses for today's wine tasting and wine pouring. Have lots of questions ready for Ryland as well. And if you do have any interest in Brooks or Kiss the Ground, please click on the web buttons that you're seeing on your screen as well, and they will take you to the websites for Kiss the Ground and for Brooks, and you can see what we're doing there and join us at other events. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I want to bring Janie back up to the stage, really just to talk about how Brooks prioritize the importance of the soil and farming. And, when I first encountered Brooks and met Brooks many years ago now, it was really one of the most important discussion points and unique points for me in tasting Brooks wines and understanding their story. And Janie, you know better than anyone else how committed to farming and to the soil Brooks and Jimmy's vision was. Can you tell us how it all comes together for you and how you manage that?
Sure. I was fortunate to step in to Brooks when Jimmy passed away, and learned at that point, I had never heard the word biodynamic before. I didn't know anything about wine or farming. But he had really been a leader in bringing biodynamic farming to the Willamette Valley for wine grapes back in the mid-90s. They had a whole group. It was small. Really, that community still is small in the Willamette Valley. It needs to be bigger, but we're working on that. But it was really inspiring in terms of what he was doing and what he was leading. And so as part of me carrying on his vision, I have continued my commitment and learned a lot about biodynamic farming. So it's a small piece in the world of farming, but knowing that we're doing what we should be doing makes a big difference. Biodynamics is not the easiest elevator pitch in the world. And one of the really exciting things that we did as soon as we started working with Fist the Round is they were working on a short 4-minute film about biodynamics. And so it's part of our partnership. We were one of the sponsors. And I want to start by showing everybody that film. So Steve, if you can play that, that would be great.
There's so much that we don't know about the natural world. There's so much we can't even imagine. Nature works in ways that we can't even fathom. Biodynamics asks you to imagine things that seem impossible.
Biodynamic farming is simply farming in service of life.
It's not easily understood, and it flies in the face of certainly the agriculture that I had exposed to me as a young farmer.
There's a leap of faith to get into this kind of farming, but when you see the results of it, it's pretty obvious that things are working the way you want them to work.
The moment a farm transitions into biodynamic agriculture, the biodiversity improves, the quality of the food improves, and also the quality of life of the farmers.
It starts with all of the good tenets of organic farming.
We're not spraying anything that is toxic. No herbicides, pesticides, so on and so forth.
Biodynamics, we go a step further in that you're leaving the land better than the way you found it.
At the end of every season, our soil is more fertile than the year before.
It's regenerative farming.
We look at the whole farm as an organism.
Human beings, plants, animals,
Cows and sheep,
Birds and insects,
frogs,
The life in the soil.
geese,
Microbes.
ducks.
we see them as part of this entire farm ecosystem. Every species around us has a meaning and purpose.
You're no longer at war with your environment, out there trying to kill bugs and weeds, and all of a sudden they're working for you. This is how we need to look at how we're going to produce our food, being part of life on the earth, not conquering life on earth.
Food starts with soil.
We're really farming the soil instead of farming crops. If you have really healthy soil, you can grow anything really well.
Whoa! This is the biggest bee I ever seen.
The healthier the soil is, that translates into higher nutrition.
There's a real straight line connection between the quality and the flavor and the aroma and the nutrition of foods grown in a biodynamic farm.
There's so much pleasure in eating, but there's so much pleasure in feeling healthy. If we can all contribute to making this mainstream, then it will start to trickle down to communities that don't have access to amazing food, to healthy food.
water, carbon, nitrogen. The plant itself becomes the pump.
Plants can pull carbon out of the air back into the soil.
Every farm is doing its part to help with climate change in its own small way.
We're a major part of what's happening now. And that's why I think this method of farming is the future.
Every penny of biodynamic food that you buy, you are supporting the farmer who is connected to earth, who is not polluting, who is a good custodian of this earth and humanity.
So that's what we're doing here as a community. We're keeping the water, the soil, the air clean for our kids someday. Are you ready to make an investment in our planet so it can be here for the people we love? Because that's what it takes.
Isn't that great?
So inspirational. I love that.
And I love too that there's so much Oregon in there. Some of you may have recognized Soder was in there, Rudy Marchese from Montanore too. So some of our other biodynamic colleagues in the Valley were included in that film as well, which is amazing. I just want to touch on a little bit about biodynamics. We are certified. I think most of you who know me, I'm a big believer in transparency. Certification process is not easy. We've been farming since 2002 and we were certified in 2013 because it wasn't at the top of my to-do list yet. But we continue to spend about 80 to 120 man hours a year just on our certification. So it's a lot of work, but it keeps that transparency so people know what we're doing. And we're not only certified in the vineyard, but in the winery as well. And being certified in the winery precludes you from making any sort of additions to your wine. So you're taking the purity from what you farmed and bringing it into the winery and producing the wine without manipulating it at all. This is a great picture of my brother actually stirring his preps. There are 9 preps that we use in biodynamics. So if you've taken organics, it's that plus. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but they all have a role basically in helping with the microbial life in the soil, the nutrients in the soil and the plant. 2 of them are sprayed directly in the vineyard, the manure and also the horn silica. The other 7 we actually make into teas and put in our compost pile. So we have a compost pile every year that is made from manure and then obviously the skins from our grapes after we've crushed them at harvest, plus all of these preparations, and we spread that in the spring. And we just did that about a month ago. So.
Yeah, and it's such an important process, as you know, you mentioned it a little, Janie, being a certified biodynamic winery, that it'll, you know, it stops you from being able to add additions, things like nitrogen and diammonium phosphate and other additives to your wines, which, you know, if you're farming in a manner that is respectful of the nature and of the soil, and you're bringing in healthy fruit, you really shouldn't need to add any of those additives. And, you know, as a winemaker myself, that's something that I always look to. I won't work with conventionally farmed vineyards. It's important for me that the fruit that's coming in the door is able to finish the fermentation and show the expressiveness of the place and the variety. And that's what you're really investing in here by doing these principles, and then cover cropping between the rows. And you're really giving the vineyard everything it needs to, you know, live its best life and then to be made into the best wine it can. And I think we continually see that in the Brooks wines. You know, they have a vitality and an energy and a transparency to them that you don't often see in conventionally made wines. And I love, you know, that you do take the time to be certified and that you put that, you know, on the back of the labels, whether it's, you know, what your giving components are, whether it's your giving components or the Demeter certification. You know, I put ingredient labeling on my wines because, you know, it's an important conversation to me that wine can have as many ingredients as a hungry man TV dinner. And, you know, that's frightful to think about. But if you're farming in the right way, you don't need to. And that's what has really forged our relationship with Brooks, and continue this, you know, important movement and conversation. And Brooks is a very important movement in the Willamette Valley and in Oregon. You know, Oregon has around 50% of the US's certified Demeter vineyards, but Brooks is one of the few wineries that is certified for Demeter biodynamics as well. And that's just, you know, it's really holding yourself accountable and really committing to the cause and to saying, this is what we believe in, this is our place, and we're not going to, you know, it's going to be the best place that it can be. We're going to support it as best as we can. And that's a big commitment. And so I love supporting Brooks, and it's such an important movement to continue in this valley. And we're fortunate in Oregon to have a large group of people, or a growing group of people, we hope, to continue that. Even though Jimmy was one of the first, I feel like, you know, his tap root has really spread and, you know, forged a great industry from that. And part of the global movement, which is what I love, is, you know, why Janie has chosen Kiss the Ground, is that Janie thinks very locally, but it has a big impact globally. And I think partnering with someone like Kiss the Ground and supporting Kiss the Ground is such an inspiring and meaningful commitment to their organization. And I'd like to welcome Ryland Engelhart from Kiss the Ground to the stage now. Ryland, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Such an amazing movie and such an amazing organization. I'm just going to fangirl a little bit too much, so I'm just going to ask you to, can you please just tell us what started all of this? How did it start? Where are you going? How many people have you touched? And I know we're going to have a lot of questions coming for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say I'm completely moved. I'm standing in a little tiny house in my farm in Fillmore, and I'm like just moved by Brooks. I'm moved by today. I'm moved by the biodynamic film that we created. Just like so, I'm inspired by who you are and your conviction, commitment. And, I just want to toast. I know we already did a toast, but I just want to toast to, how extraordinary the integrity, the backbone of what and who you guys are and what you stand for. And, as a nonprofit who relies on, businesses and philanthropic support, you guys have been really instrumental in supporting our work. And, you guys don't go light and on the surface, you go deep and full on. And I just want to acknowledge that. And so, cheers to Brooks Wine, to Bree, to Janie for, being extraordinary human beings and bringing something beautiful to the world and continuing it. So, yay. Awesome. So again, thank you. Super grateful to be here. My name is Ryland Engelhart. I'm one of the co-founders of Kiss the Ground, and I'm also the executive director. I'm going to speak for maybe 25 minutes to really kind of our unlikely path of how we came to be, championing the regenerative agriculture movement. As Janie said, we're not scientists, we're not farmers. I don't have any education in this. I literally got touched in a moment, and it just became a whisper from somewhere that my life was to be a champion for the regenerative agriculture movement. So as an organization, we're an education advocacy nonprofit based here in California, really on a mission to awaken people to the possibilities of regeneration. We had an awakening. We saw that life could actually get better in the future if we did agriculture in a different way. And that just became the song of our hearts that we have continued to sing over the last 7 years. And so, I know that many of you have seen the film in the last 24 hours, which I hope you're totally feeling inspired, lit up, hopeful. And really that film is designed to be that catalyzing moment that we had some 8 years ago to really awaken, we're hoping a global population around understanding ecological principles of soil health, regenerative agriculture. And so, Kiss the Ground, really what we seek to do is we seek to transform lifestyle and consumer behavior. We seek to transform agricultural practices through education and demonstration, and we seek to transform public policy through political will, or building political will and action. So I'm going to, again, share a little bit about my personal journey. We can, and then we'll kind of a little bit into the organization, and then a little bit of the soil science that kind of was inspiring to us, and then we'll end with a Q&A where people can ask questions. So Steve, our awesome producer, you want to bring the next slide up? So again, as I said, I started with no education in this realm of knowledge. I had been in hospitality. My family and I had created a small little business here in California called Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre, which are organic plant-based restaurants. And we had a vision of how we can bring healthy food with an attitude of gratitude to the world. And we did that for the last 15 years. And that's been an amazing, amazing journey. And that actually led me to New Zealand, where I had the opportunity to speak on our business philosophy, which is called Sacred Commerce, which was really about how do we bring love and transformation into our work environments. And so it was there in New Zealand that I actually had the opportunity to sit as an audience member in a panel discussion. And we can bring the next slide up. And I sat in a panel discussion that was called, what this slide says, is can human beings sustain themselves or sustain life on planet Earth? And basically 5 out of the 6 experts spoke very explicitly to the dire state that our planet is in, and that the ecosystem collapse, biodiversity collapse, the amount of carbon in our atmosphere, all these different functions of our Earth are indicators that we're heading into the 6th mass extinction. And it was literally, I was weeping tears in this panel discussion. And the last gentleman who spoke was a guy by the name of Graham Sate. And he basically spoke something that had never been connected for me in my life. What he spoke to was that plants, trees, grasses, and soil microorganisms could actually be the greatest technology on planet Earth to reverse climate change. That we could actually take the problem of too much carbon in our atmosphere, and that we could turn it into the solution. We could glue our soils back together with these carbon glues that are a problem up here, and we can make them a solution down here. And literally, this was like, I'm running an organic plant-based restaurant, sustainability, this. I think I know a lot about a lot, and I'm literally being totally, splayed open in my mind. I'm like, how did I not understand the way that soil works, the way that photosynthesis works, the way that ecology works, and that there actually is a plan and a way that we can actually have life be better 2 generations forward than worse. You can go to the next slide. So here I am seeing this new possibility. I'm seeing, oh my God, there is a way that life can get better on planet Earth. Up until this point, I think sustainability, conservation, do less harm are really the best possible ways that human beings could interact with nature. No context, no reference of how regeneration could actually work. And here I am seeing for the first time how regeneration works, that plants, trees, grasses can actually be the greatest technology for actually pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it safely into our soils, and that everyone who eats could actually participate in that revolution, in that transformation. Next slide. that agriculture could actually go from the system that is arguably the most destructive, corrosive system on the planet to the industry and the system that actually could be the great redeemer. That the way we eat food could actually heal the land and regenerate and balance our climate. This was, I mean, again, this was just like, oh my God, how did I not know this was a miracle? And again, I don't know why certain things, certain times, that certain messages strike us, but literally this was a message that was felt like a spiritual revelation. It was like, oh my God, this is the most important message that has ever come across my desk. And for whatever reason, I'm being whispered in my ear that it's my job to become an advocate, a champion, an evangelist for this message. And so I went, next slide. And again, just to kind of dive in a little bit into the sort of idea, the simple soil science of it, is that, you know, most context of carbon, we see carbon as the enemy. There's too much carbon, it's released into the atmosphere, it's causing, you know, it's a problem, it's a toxin, it's a poisonous substance. But really, inside of this transformational view, what I really saw was that carbon is not the enemy. It's actually the building block of life. And there's actually an opportunity of this carbon in the atmosphere that actually can be an opportunity to bring that carbon back through our plants and put that back into our soil. And that actually everything alive is made of carbon. We're carbon-based life forms, and that carbon is actually the building block of life. And that, next slide. That, you know, we mostly understood the, you know, ideas of photosynthesis maybe in 6th grade, when we understood that, you know, plants and trees pulled carbon in from the atmosphere and then made oxygen for us to breathe. But what we didn't really get, and was actually relatively newer science, is that 30 to 70% of the carbon that plants, trees, and grasses grab and sequester from the atmosphere are sending those carbons down through their roots and exuding those carbons as carbohydrates, carbon sugars, and feeding microorganisms in that soil. And when microorganisms eat that carbon, they actually exchange and give minerals back to those plants, such that those plants can be healthy and vibrant, nutrient dense and resilient. And so, you know, really, when we think about it, we knew that carbon, or trees hold carbon in their trunks. They're made of carbon. But what we didn't get is that actually healthy soil is made from carbon that came from thin air. And the way that the carbon cycle works for 500 million years is the way that actually we have a livable, inhabitable planet, that photosynthesis has been the mechanism that has created balance for our planet since the beginning of time. And we have an opportunity to see this, understand this, and manage land in a way that is actually sequestering that carbon back into our soils and healing our soils and balancing our climate. Next slide. So given that rebuilding soil is possible, and it's relatively, we can do it quicker than we ever, or than we've thought before. There's some statistic that says it takes 1,000 years to build 1 inch of topsoil, which is a relatively old perspective, which is about, you know, sand, silt, and clay being eroded off of mountains and, you know, coming down and creating topsoil, not really understanding that we're actually able to pull large amounts of carbon, sequester it in our soil, building carbon-rich topsoil. So given that this is possible, we can restore fertility, we can replenish water sources, because again, when we have healthy soil, we have the ability for water infiltration. Because when we've broken our soils, when we have just a, you know, dead soil, water runs off, evaporates. We have no ability for that water to actually get into that soil and serve in the way that it needs to serve for the plants to grow. And lastly, we have the opportunity to reverse global warming. Next slide. This gave me this moment of, oh my God, we can do this. There is actually a way forward for humanity. And, you know, a very, very amazing soil scientist, you know, shared that a mere 2% increase of carbon content in the planet's soils could offset 100% of all greenhouse gas emissions going into our atmosphere. So there I was, 32 years old, having this oh my God moment, feeling in my heart and mind the truth of this message, and that it was my life's work to champion this this movement. And I had no idea what I was going to do, what there was for me to do. I was just one individual having an inspiring moment. So I found myself back in Los Angeles from where I live. Next slide. And I essentially started just building community around this idea. Do you know that soil can be a solution to reversing climate change? Everywhere I went, every table I went up to in my restaurants, I would basically be this salesman for regenerative agriculture and healthy soil. And I just became this evangelist everywhere I went. You know, I remember approaching Al Gore and communicating to him, and he wasn't even connected to this ideal. Bill McKibben, you know, some of the most, prolific climate change advocates, really connected to, what the solutions are on the table, weren't connected to this idea, didn't understand this potential. And the fact that it was so unknown, it just became more and more the reason that, okay, there's a role for us to play. We need, we live here in Los Angeles. I've seen the way that we can grow a movement through sharing stories. With the success of with Cafe Gratitude, and I really saw, growing the plant-based organic health and wellness movement. I saw, wow, if there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come, and this idea that soil could be a solution to reversing climate change became, the North Star. And so again, I started gathering people in my house, in my living room every Monday. The local politicians in Los Angeles, musicians, filmmakers, artists, activists, and we just basically started whiteboarding. How can we have this message become, a solution that the world recognizes and acknowledges? And so we started, that was kind of the beginnings of Kiss the Ground, which we in turn became a 501c3 nonprofit. And kind of our first message was, how do we tell this story in a way that actually, the world can grok and, get their head around? Because I was actually sending people to the internet to find Graham Sate, the guy that had inspired me in New Zealand. And essentially the videos of him were so bad, and, such bad audio and poor angles and poor lighting, and it was an hour and a half of really bad slideshow. I was like, no one's going to get that. We need to, create beautiful, inspiring content that really awakens this message and gives it validity. And so we launched our first piece of content that we created was called The Soil Story. And we launched that in 2014-15, and we connected it to Governor Brown's Healthy Soils Initiative in California, and we garnered 23,000 signatures to support the public to understand this idea and support California in this new mini initiative that was being developed. So that was kind of the first action that we took. And ultimately that piece of media has then become used all around the world and been translated into 9 different languages. We also brought that media to COP21, the big climate conference in Paris, and we did a French version of it, and we released it at COP21, and we actually were able to get the soil story written on the Eiffel Tower, illuminating every 7 minutes. It'd say climate action now, and then it would say soil story. People would be like, what's soil got to do with climate action? And we were like, well, you're going to find out pretty soon. So next slide. So again, we got very lit up about regenerative agriculture and how we can, regenerate soils. But to just put some framing and to get connected to the level of degradation that our current agricultural system is causing on planet Earth, it's pretty dire. We as a civilization, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, said that a nation that destroys their soil destroys themselves. And actually, Wendell Berry, who's kind of a godfather of natural farming, said, the plow will kill more men than the sword. And basically what he was speaking to is that when we till ground continuously, it continues to lose function and it oxidizes, and the life is no longer in that soil and it becomes dust. And there's historical precedent for that. The Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, is not the Fertile Crescent because they just wanted to call it a name that it didn't look. It was at one time very fertile. The Sahara Desert was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, and basically mismanaged soils and over-tilling and overgrazing led to fertile land that has become desert. And now we're doing that at a global scale. So United Nations released a paper 8 years ago saying that we have 60 years left before all topsoil is degraded. 98% of what we eat comes from soil, and we're losing an average of 4 tons of topsoil per acre per year on agricultural land in this country, in the US. So, it was communicated pretty clearly in the film that the way that we are feeding ourselves is undermining the biology such that life can exist on this planet. Next slide. But as I've been enthusiastically sharing, regenerative agriculture, biodynamic agriculture, actually can rebuild that soil much quicker than we thought possible. One of our advisors and someone who was in the film, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Alan Williams, who's a regenerative rancher and farmer trainer. What he's saying that what we used to think took 10, 15 years now can be done in 2 or 3. And what he's speaking to is the ability for us to rebuild fertility, rebuild soil organic matter back into our soils, rebuild biodiversity back into our systems. So next slide. So what is regenerative agriculture? There's some debate on the definition of what regenerative agriculture is. This is one definition that was agreed upon by many brands a few years back. But simply, regenerative agriculture is an agriculture that is causing regeneration, that is building resources that the system relies on to produce a crop and to produce life coming off that land. So in essence, nature's design is regenerative, and regenerative agriculture is just aligning our agricultural system with nature's design. Next slide. So, we've been talking about soil organic matter, but there's so many co-benefits to regenerative agriculture. As I spoke to a little bit, when we rebuild our soil and our soil becomes aggregated and it has carbon in it and there's life in it, there's an ability for water to infiltrate. The difference between dead soil, it could take a half hour for water to infiltrate a half inch, whereas in healthy soil, we can infiltrate water in 1 to 2 seconds at that depth it took half an hour. So, when we think about, the scale of agriculture across this country, we're flying a plane and we see the land is just being cut up into little squares and most of it's just being left tilled, half the season. That land has an inability for water to be able to infiltrate, which actually totally denudes the possibility for us to be able to recharge our groundwater. When there's carbon in our soils, just like a carbon filter, a Brita, when we have carbon-rich soils, water goes through that carbon and it actually filters that water, and we have cleaner water coming through that system. When we have healthy soil, we have this soil becomes like a sponge, and it gives us the ability to have much greater drought resilience and resistance. Next slide. When we, speaking about nutrition and healthy food, when we have this exchange at this biological level where there's microbes feeding minerals and trace minerals into the root, you can have a root in the ground, but that root can't get to that manganese or that copper, but there's a microbe that actually can break that mineral down and give that to that root, which actually creates nutrient density, plant health, and food health for us when we actually get to that eating that food. So we can create abundant healthy food high in nutrient density. And when plants are having a lot of disease and pest pressure, it's because they're actually weakened. So when we have a very healthy biological system under the ground, those plants are going to be much more resistant to disease and pest pressure. Next slide. Farmer prosperity, hugely important. Farmers are going broke left and right. One of their biggest expenses is inputs. And when we have a healthy soil system that is able to fuel the growth and the health of those plants, we can reduce those inputs, which again is one of the largest expenses for farmers. And as we start to understand the importance of biodiversity, it actually allows us to stack enterprises and to create more profitable farming systems. Next slide. As the biodynamic film so beautifully articulated, we can have farming systems that are not just producing value for our food that we're selling, but creating ecosystem services, restoring biodiversity in agricultural systems. So regenerative agriculture really is about farming in service to life, as the film said. Next slide. And again, as I've been communicating a lot, we can work with nature's 500 million year old technology as the greatest carbon capturing technology, and in the most inexpensive way, sequester carbon that's too much in the atmosphere and turn it as a carbon glue to glue our soils, to heal our soils back in the ground. Next slide. So what are the 5 main principles of regenerative agriculture? Least amount of mechanical disturbance, least amount of tilling, least amount of synthetic inputs. We want to have a root in the ground as much of the year as possible. That's why vineyards, perennials are more adapted to regenerative agriculture, because you have a root that's continuously feeding those carbon sugars into the ground. So we want a root, because again, if we see soil as alive, and the way that it eats is it eats sugars that are coming from plants. Everything alive needs food, and if we don't have a living root in the soil, we're not feeding that living soil. We need to keep our soils covered. We need to reintegrate our animals back onto farming systems. The godfather of biodynamics, Rudolf Steiner, said, a farm is not a farm, it doesn't have a cow. Something to that effect. But essentially he saw that interconnection, and that interconnection between animals grazing and creating this fertility loop of cycling nutrients on a farm. And he also said that if we want to mimic nature, nature has always been a harmony dance between plants, animals, microbes, and we need to have that dance happening on our farms. And then always looking to how to increase biodiversity. Next slide. So regenerative farmers are our heroes. We've been idolizing many different things, but we haven't really given the appreciation and love and adoration for people who are feeding our communities in a healthy way and are regenerating our ecosystems. And really, we want, as a culture, to really edify and get connected to, wow, they are the essential workers in our lives, 7 days a week, and we want to see them and hold them up as heroes. And this is Larry Kundarian, who's one of the farmers in our farmland transition program, just north of LA. Next slide. So Kiss the Ground, what do we do? I've talked a lot. What does Kiss the Ground do? We basically work through 4 main programs. Next slide. We started off as a media and storytelling organization. We said, all right, how do we tell this story? How do we make this story sexy, beautiful, compelling, connected to what people think is important? And we started making films, starting with The Soil Story. We've made over 60 short films over the last 8 years. Thank you, Brooks, for supporting, some of those projects. As we saw, Farming and Service to Life was one of the films that was really about how do we bring a contemporary lens to biodynamics to really have it being seen as it is. It is the only certified agriculture. Well, there's regenerative organic is just coming online, but essentially it is the OG regenerative agricultural label. Next slide. So this is just some kind of like some of the scale of which this film has impacted consciousness and awareness. So the film has had over 1 billion media impressions. It's won over 50 film festivals. It's been seen over 5 million times. It's being shown in 40 countries in 25 languages. There's a free educational cut that's being distributed through the National Science Teachers Association. That's being marketed to 100,000 schools, which has the potential of reaching 30 million students. And that's completely free to schools. And we've also made a 45-minute cut that's more relevant to farmers and focuses on farmer prosperity and less about climate change. So those are being distributed freely as well. And then just that there's the demand and the excitement around this film has been, we've had over 1,000 requests to do in-person screenings. So we're basically going to be scheduling over the next 24 months doing films in community centers, faith communities, churches, doing all kinds of screenings throughout the community to get the word out about this film and the possibilities of regeneration. Next slide. So stewardship, another key program that Kiss the Ground has been championing. Really, we saw, all right, we became, with no real experience, we became powerful change makers in the regenerative movement. And we thought, how do we duplicate ourselves? So we said, all right, we got to create education that can duplicate ourselves so we can have advocates for regenerative agriculture all over the world. So we created a course called the Soil Advocacy Training, which is our first of many courses that are really creating powerful, empowered, inspired advocates. And we have over 3,000 advocates in over 25 countries around the world, working on the ground projects, from murals, doing TED Talks, bringing policy reform, all different ways that they're being activated, inspired, and empowered to bring this regenerative agriculture into action. And then the next course that we're releasing, really, really proud to say, is that Brooks Wine is one of the key sponsors for it. Next slide. It is a regenerative gardening course. There's actually 2 courses, a beginner's and an advanced gardening course. And it really is empowering anyone in how you can be a regenerative gardener or farmer in small spaces or big spaces. And we found this amazing, we partnered with an amazing teacher educator woman named Tashonda Giles Jones, her life has been about educating environmental advocacy, really inspiring gardeners everywhere. So we're thrilled about this course is launching, is going to be released May 19th. So we're thrilled that that's our next advocacy course that we're launching. Next slide. So yes, next program is Farmland. We saw in Southern California, we started having farmers saying, we're hearing your stories, we're seeing your videos, really inspiring. How do we get involved? How do we learn more? How do we participate? Even though we are not experts in, technical training, we thought, all right, how do we actually help farmers who are interested and inspired? So we created a Farmland program that provides scholarships to farmers to technical training, so to some of the best technical trainers that we know about in this country and the world. And so they have an opportunity to take a technical training course. They get soil testing, and they get mentorship over a 3-year transition period. And we have 38 farmers in that program, over 30,000 acres under management. And the new addition coming into 2021 is a micro grant program where we're offering micro grants to farmers to improve their infrastructure so that they can improve their regenerative farming systems. So next slide. Just to bring some faces and names and reality to who those 38 farmers are. Those are some of the farmers. They're in California and also Minnesota. So those are some of the farmers that are in our program that are in transition. Next slide. So last program that we have is our policy department. So we started at a local level working in Los Angeles at a policy level, and we've actually been able to develop a program called Regenerate LA, which is a land management practice for recreation and park areas that are going to be managed in a regenerative organic way. And as that program gets solidified and developed, the goal and the objective is that we could then pass that playbook to cities all across the country that could manage their parks and recreation areas in a regenerative organic way. And then next, since the film has come out, we've had the opportunity to really step into the national policy arena around regenerative agriculture. And this actually is an image of Gabe Brown from the film you may recognize, and House Representative David Scott, who's the chair of the House Ag Committee under the new administration. He saw the Kiss the Ground film, was totally lit up, and hosted the first ag meeting of the new administration, where he brought the committee together and based it around how agriculture and climate change and agriculture could be a solution to climate change. And Gabe Brown testified for 3 hours, and they watched the Kiss the Ground trailer as kind of the kind of cornerstone of the event. And this is leading to sequential more opportunities for us to bring experts to really influence high-level lawmakers around this potential. Next slide. I've been talking a lot, and I think I'm close to out of time, but the next big campaign, the next big thing that Kiss the Ground is working on is that there's a new farm bill in 2023, and that our kind of big foolish project, our big audacious next project, is thinking that we can use our position of storytelling, garnering influencer support, thought leadership, policymakers, and that we can actually garner 10 million signatures to reform the 2023 Farm Bill to incentivize regenerative agriculture. So that is our, that's probably going to launch in probably June or July, but it's going to be a series of different campaigns using music, art, entertainment, storytelling to garner a huge coalition of brands, individuals, influencers, organizations to all bring this collective voice that we want our future to be regenerated. And we're going to start with where we are in America, and we want the Farm Bill to guide that transition. So that's the big what's next for Kiss the Ground. And next slide, I think, is my final slide. And this is my co-founder's wife, Abby, and really kind of, where we're asking, the organization was inspired by a Rumi quote, which said, "Let the beauty you love be all that you do. There's hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground." And so my question to you is, how are you going to kiss the ground? And we obviously have some suggestions. Obviously, you're already, supporting Brooks, which is, amazing way to kiss the ground. But from a Kiss the Ground perspective, we're encouraging people to watch the film, share the film, host a screening. Go to kisstheground.com. We have a genie on our website called Find Your Path, which you can type in who you are, what your interests are, and it gives you some actions to take to become part of the movement. We're also encouraging people to become soil advocates or regenerative gardeners starting May 19th. And then we also curated in partnership with Regeneration International, a regenerative farm map. So find a local regenerative farmer near you and start buying one food product from that farmer. And, you know, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, host a dinner, share about the potential of regenerative agriculture. And then lastly, we're a nonprofit. We have a membership program. For as low as $5 a month, you can support and be part of the regeneration to really champion the work that Kiss the Ground is doing. So I so honor and thank you all for your attention, your listening, for Brooks giving me the platform to share, for your support, for these amazing wines. Oh my God, I've never seen Kiss the Ground's name on a wine bottle before. This is so cool. Yeah, so grateful, and we can get to some questions. And thanks for my unbridled enthusiasm.
So great.
Love the enthusiasm. And Janie, I don't know about you, but I couldn't help thinking about, you know, some of the farmers that we talk to about, you know, organic and biodynamic and regenerative farming. And, you know, what if they could grow another crop in between their rows, you know, while they're, you know, making cover crops, helping the grapes.
Literally down here, I'm living on my sister's farm. It's a 17-acre regenerative organic farm, and it's coffee, avocados, and citrus, and the young trees. We're growing popcorn between the young trees, and it's been actually a great cash crop in between the rows of the trees that are not producing any food yet. Popcorn, it stays around forever, really shelf stable. You know, basically we can sell as much as we can grow. So totally.
I love it because, you know, we talk about needing to, you know, build nitrogen in our soils, you know, in between. And so what if we're, you know, planting pea shoots and barley and oats, and we're actually able to harvest those and sell them at the farmer's market, or, you know, as we go in to buy a bottle of Brooks wine at the tasting room, there's also a bag of pea shoots that have come from in between the rows. It's
yeah, well, in thinking about this too, I didn't know, Ryland, you mentioned a little bit about what you're doing at the government level, but I'm the board chair for Wine America, which is the national lobbying entity for the wine industry, and we do a lot of work on the Farm Bill every year. So that could be a really cool connection, actually, for us too.
Let's definitely bring. Yeah, let's rally that energy together. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Oh, so exciting.
There's so many possibilities, and I think it's just getting the word out, you know, having material like this, communication like this, to be able to spread the word, and then, you know, wine being a medium for that as well is hugely important, and makes it just even more accessible and allows us to get the word out. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how excited there's so many people that I want to send gifts to. Like, this is the best gift that I've ever had. I mean, this is like the coolest thing to be able to send people now. I mean, I'm like so lit up about how many people I can send this to. It's just so awesome.
And it's absolutely gorgeous. And that's one of the things that I did love about Brooks when I first visited Brooks in 2014. And I just remember tasting the wines, especially the Rieslings and like this aromatic white, where I could smell the lavender from, you know, what was growing outside in their biodynamic garden next to the vineyard, and, you know, having all of these organic oils, you know, be a part of the wine. It just felt like it really grounded you in a place. And for me, that's what's really special about, you know, these wines as well, and what first, you know, really drew me to Brooks as well, as long as with, you know, Jimmy's story as well. But I love that you can feel it and sense it in the glass.
So I'll tell you a little bit about both the wines, because then I think we should get to Q&A, because that's very interesting. But one thing to know about both of these wines for Kiss the Ground, we did put them on the website today. 25% of proceeds from any sale is going directly back to Kiss the Ground. So, like I said, you're the first to know.
Amazing.
For all of you that love the Amicus, you probably are in love with this white wine because they are the same blend. Haha. So while we're out of Amicus, we are not out of Kiss the Ground White, which is
nice.
So it is a blend of Riesling, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Gewürztraminer, and Muscat. All those grapes are fermented separately. They're all fermented dry, and we do bottlings of all those varietals as well. So this is an intentional blend where the proportions of those grapes change every year, but it's modeled after an Alsatian field blend. So it's delicious.
Absolutely.
So delicious, so aromatic, so vibrant. It has energy to it, you know. It kind of gives you lift. I love it.
And the red wine, so this is a wine that it's a 2018. So I think it's our first 2018 besides the red letter that we've actually released.
Oh.
It's about 75% from our estate vineyard, the one that's biodynamically farmed, and then the remaining fruit comes from Temperance Hill, which is an organic vineyard, also certified, not too far from us. So not too much oak, about 20% new oak on this. 18 was one of those just amazing, beautiful vintages. So this wine's got just a really nice balance between ripe enough fruit, but really good acid retention too.
It really is. 18 was just one of those return to perfect Willamette Valley vintage. You know, it had the nice summer with warm days, but it had the typical, you know, maritime influence coming down that Van Duzer corridor, and not too hot days as well. And we didn't get smashed at the end of the season with rains. We just were allowed to pick the grapes when they were perfectly ready to pick them. And I think that you see that lovely freshness of fruit, but you also see a real like salty umami sort of seaweed kelpiness coming through from the wind influence that, you know, you so feel at Temperance Hill and at the Brooks Vineyard as well. Yeah, I love the depth of this, Janie. This wine is just a baby. It's going to yeah, the blood orange. You know, there's tea leaf, almost like Earl Grey tea in here as well with the ripe red berries.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't gonna hope I was just gonna stick to the white, but you're all this description is giving me the opportunity. All right, I gotta jump in.
It's a hard job, Ryland, but somebody's got to do it.
That's right.
Somebody's got to do it. So the first question, and I'll just respond to it, is there a published list somewhere of all the biodynamic wineries and vineyards in Oregon? Yes, it's on the Demeter website. So I will put a link to that in the follow-up email tomorrow that will have the recording so that everybody can have access to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. And then a couple people missed the statistic, Ryland, about the 2% to reduce 100% of the carbon. Can you restate what that stat was?
Yeah, it's Professor Ratan Lal's statistic, which said a mere 2% soil organic matter increase in our global soils would mitigate 100% of annual CO2 emissions. So 2% is not a lot. We can, you know, farmers are being able to generate, you know, 1% per year plus in regenerative farming systems. So it really does outlay the possibility of like, all right, this is really doable. So yeah, a mere 2% increase of our global soils could offset 100% of global emissions.
Amazing. And are you okay if I include your presentation in the follow-up email too?
Sure.
Okay. So everybody will get a copy of that as well.
Ryland, is that what you're working on with the Farm Bill and with, you know, in DC? Is it to try to incentivize carbon farming or regenerative farming practices by a percentage with America's farmers?
Yeah, I mean the vision is that you know, there's so many incentives and you know, there's a lot of incentives for keeping status quo, and how can we have the general public be so connected to this opportunity and make the pressure be so strong. I mean, we've seen this over time. There's ways of being. There was things that Barack Obama was not in support of. The public said, we're in support of this. And then it became, all right, we're in support of this. So the idea and the potential that Kiss the Ground sees that we have the ability is, you know, how can we garner a huge microphone, a huge strengthened voice? But yeah, basically we would be stating 5 things that would be altered in the 2023 Farm Bill that would be encouraging regenerative agricultural practices to be implemented and incentivized. So we're essentially building towards a launch in July, but we've been planting seeds as we've been setting up these screenings. Actually, literally on the 16th on April this month, we're hosting a Q&A for basically all House members and all their staffers are being invited to a Q&A on the 16th with Dr. Mark Hyman, Layla June, John Boyd, basically experts from indigenous land management practices to the challenges that Black farmers have had historically through discrimination, through regenerative organic farmers that are doing that at scale, to human health components. So we're putting a panel together with all these different ideas and kind of concerns being addressed, using the Kiss the Ground film as kind of a tool for opening up the dialogue and then getting these lawmakers to really understand.
Oh, we lost
him.
There he is.
Oh, he's back. For a minute.
Ryland, one of the things that was really interesting to me was, it's one of the things that we notice in making wine is that when we're making wine from vineyards that are biodynamically farmed, we don't have the stress on the fermentations. They're much healthier. We don't need to, intervene and be manipulative in the cellar. And seeing that conversation translate through to the nutrition value in the food of regeneratively farmed food, that was really powerful. A component to me that I hadn't really thought about. And I was just thinking, is there a movement to have like a regeneratively farmed logo on certain food products? Organics has become so mainstream now. Do you think there'll be a movement towards having that regenerative logo on foods so that we can understand that? Or
yeah, I mentioned that earlier briefly and maybe not clearly. There's a regenerative organic certification, ROC, which is about 60 or 80 brands that are kind of in development on products that will be released in the next year or two, that are basically addressing 3 things: animal welfare, workers' rights, and soil health practices. And it basically sits on top of the organic certification. And then there's basically those 3 other components. And that's called the regenerative organic certification. And then there's another one from the Savory Institute, which is mostly about grazing, so livestock. And so they also have a holistic management certification that actually Timberland just released a boot that has leather that's coming from a regeneratively managed grazing system.
Wow.
So it's actually it's going outside of even just the food industry. There's a lot of interest in the natural resources, textile, fashion industry of how can we have regeneration taking place in the creation of other things beyond food. And so the Savory Institute, which is actually one of our partner organizations, when we send farmers through our scholarship technical training, they can either go through the Soil Health Academy, which is Gabe and Ray from the film, the Savory Institute, Alan Savory, who was also in the film, or Regrarians, Darren Doherty, are the three kind of technical trainers that farmers can go through education through our farmland program. So there's two that are right now on top of, again, biodynamics has been, as I said, the OG certification that is really speaking to seeing the farm as a whole system, and that we're not just organic has become, and again, organic in the beginning really was a proactive approach to agriculture, but it really has just been a reductionist effect of the things you can't do, so make you organic, versus what you should be doing to actually increase the fertility and the biodiversity and the enhancement of the land, versus just not doing certain treatments, not using certain chemicals, not using certain inputs. So yeah, there is a few certifications that are coming down the pipe.
Good. I love it's something that I think Janie and I discuss, and a few others in the industry, the wine industry here in Oregon discuss, is that, wine has a platform to have these conversations. And, when you're looking around the Willamette Valley, I'm a cyclist, and this time of year drives me crazy because I'm, cycling, and a lot of the hazelnut orchards are tilling their soils, and you're trying to cycle through clouds of dust, and then I just, you look to the hills, and there's less and less of the soil going off into the atmosphere. And I just think that, if one part of an agricultural product in a region can start making these changes and have these conversations, and the trickle down, the conversation down to the rest of the farming in that valley. The Willamette Valley is very much an agricultural valley. We rely on Christmas trees, hazelnuts, berries, and grapes, and having these conversations, or having a platform to have these conversations, is something that is, I think, unique to where wine can be positioned for the greater consumer.
Hey, I'm seeing a question. How much wine? What's the volume of this Kiss the Ground vintage? Could we get the Kiss the Ground vintage at one of the restaurants, Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre? I don't know what the volume is, and if there's that kind of volume, but I'd love to have that conversation, because I'm so glad this question came up, because we hadn't even talked about it. But I think that's a really cool. We actually just built the first mural in Los Angeles dedicated to Kiss the Ground. It's just been built in the Cafe Gratitude parking lot on Larchmont. This beautiful mural. So it would be cool to accompany a Kiss the Ground wine featured. So let's talk about that. That's
we'll talk about that for sure. That would be amazing.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
That'd be good. I feel a little embarrassed that I didn't think about it.
we just launched the wine.
Today.
It's brand new, so.
And Ryland, there's another question about how can we be the best change agents for this movement? Is it following Kiss the Ground? Is it becoming soil advocates? Is it, a list of wineries or a list of producers to support who are regeneratively farming and only purchasing for them? What do you think is the best way to be an advocate or spread the message?
Again, I just have to follow my path, to get ourselves educated, so that we can, everywhere where we go, we can be an evangelist for this message and for this. It's like, how do we be the change we wish to see in the world? So, we need to embody the education. So that's why we created soil advocacy training. Obviously, Kiss the Ground, follow us if you do the whole social media thing. We're continuously pumping out information, education around, this conversation. So, follow us. But obviously, taking one of our courses, we have, for those that then take the courses, we have a whole a Mighty Networks community where all people who have done either the gardening course or the soil advocacy training course are part of a network of people who are sharing, like, hey, I did this in my community. I created this whole composting system within my school system. This is how I did it. So, you know, once you become, you know, kind of awakened, you become and then, you know, obviously we need community to keep that fire stoked and inspired and, you know, keep us moving forward. So, you know, again, it's getting ourselves educated and then creating community around, you know, these ideas and learning what we can do given our place in the world and, you know, what access that we have. But really, you know, we all have a unique circle of people that we have influence over. And so there's many little corners of the world that we can actually create a new awareness, which ultimately creates new action, new behavior, and new activity. But yes, absolutely. So, you know, get yourself educated, read the book, watch the film, do the soil advocacy training, follow us on, you know, Kiss the Ground, you know, on Instagram or on Facebook. And then, you know, again, find, you know, explore your local food shed and, you know, totally map it out and start, you know, voting with your dollars in, you know, what is the food shed and who are the people who are caring for soil. And let's have those people be elevated, recognized, and, you know, become important in our communities. And ultimately that will become the new normal. And so that's, and then obviously, you know, it's a little thing, but it's an important thing. And we talk about it in the film is, you know, composting. How do we become, where we actually can participate in regeneration? We're taking waste and turning it into fertility and turning it back into the fertility system. We're putting it back into the soil bank account versus just putting it into the landfill, which creates methane gas and, you know, exacerbates the problem.
Yeah. And there's another really interesting question as well about the regenerative agriculture movement. Do you think that is going to be a platform for lifting up Indigenous voices and practices? And I think of it here in our, you know, in our wine industry, in our community, there's a lot of Latinx, you know, farmers in the vineyard. They don't necessarily own land, but they have very traditional systems and are some of the best farmers that we know. How can we, you know, how do you think that spreads, or is that going to be a conversation that becomes more important, Indigenous farming?
Hugely important conversation. You know, we transparently, we had gotten some pushback about the film not being, you know, so inclusive, so having a diverse representation of farmers, not really threading the narrative to really understand that Indigenous land management practices that were happening in California, that were happening with Aboriginals in Australia, that were happening in Chesapeake Bay, you know, literally there was large civilizations of Indigenous communities living in a way for hundreds, thousands of years that were maintaining and regenerating landscapes. And, you know, the regenerative movement is, I think, a really, really important movement to actually create some, you know, some healing and some acknowledgement to the brilliance and wisdom that has been mostly marginalized, ignored, and squashed through colonialism. And yeah, it's been a big commitment of Kiss the Ground, is to really, you know, start to understand, you know, the that wisdom, and, you know, start to collaborate with, you know, leaders that are the voice for that movement. I just had Lila June on my podcast, who's an amazing young voice, 31 years old, poet, musician, who's really kind of stepped into a role of deep diving into understanding the ecological knowledge of Indigenous cultures and having that be, you know, re-emerging to really dissolve what colonialism has said, you know, those cultures were, you know, void, not intelligent, not, you know, not sophisticated. In turn, we can snuff them out and And so there is a huge opportunity for healing and regeneration, not just from an ecological standpoint, but from a cultural and a respecting of cultures that really understood this at a deep level. And so we're actually producing a piece of content called the Regenerative Ag Story, also in 2021, which will be the third trilogy to the soil story, the compost story, and the regenerative ag story. And we're going to do kind of as an expression of kind of rectifying our mistake of not really including that much in the film, is really having that story include the historical roots of indigenous wisdom that really were the tenets that are the worldview of regenerative agriculture. And so I think that the regenerative agriculture movement there's a huge opportunity to really emphasize and bring that culture and that wisdom back into the light of a really important culture that needs to be listened to at this time when we're flailing as a civilization, heading towards extinction. So
yeah, absolutely. Ryland, you mentioned the podcast. Is that podcast under Kiss the Ground, or is it under your personal podcast? Where do we listen to these podcasts?
Yeah, you can find it on all the platforms that you can find podcasts, but it is the Kiss the Ground podcast. And we have everybody from like Marianne Williamson to Naima Penniman to Mark Hyman to Charles Eisenstein. So it's philosophers, thought leaders, farmers. I had Charles Macy, who I was showing you the book earlier. For those of you that want to read a thick book, that's really the Bible of regenerative agriculture, that really, again, does communicate the indigenous wisdom that was held over millennia in Australia, and then the Western mind, the mechanical mind, eroded and destroyed the ecology within 50, 100 years, and how do we get that back? So really important book. He's on the podcast. Graham Sate was the guy in New Zealand who inspired me originally, who that panel discussion about can humans sustain themselves on planet Earth, that was Graham Sate's inspiration. So he's on the podcast. My sister's on there, she's a young regenerative organic farmer and chef out of LA.
Awesome.
So she's in there. Dr. John Boyd, who started the National Black Farmers Association, who's really bringing light to the injustice in the USDA and lending to Black farmers over the last 50 years, and shares his personal story about that. So yeah, check it out.
Amazing. Will do. Very exciting. Oh, there's one other question that's come through. Is it possible to over sequester carbon in the soil?
There's definitely been like conversations that like, oh, it comes to a point where you can't put any more carbon in soils. And there's some debate on that. But the reality is if we look to the Great Plains of whether Africa or this country where bison roamed for millennia, there's 10, 12 feet of black, rich topsoil that has carbon, all the way down through it. It's, so sure, we could probably, put too much carbon in our soils, but that's not even close to the reality that we're living with. We got way too much up there and not enough down here. We need a lot more down here. So the more that we can get down there, the better. I don't think, in our lifetime or in our kids' lifetime, we have to worry about that.
Awesome. Janie, where do we go from here? Are we doing a Kiss the Ground gardening course? Is that going to be a future Beyond Brooks? Where does this partnership go?
Ryland brought that up. We do have a class that he said is starting May 19th, and that'll be great for the home gardener. And that will be our topic, because we will have 9 more Beyond Brookses next year, maybe even 10. Not too many repeats, but Kiss the Ground will be a repeat. So we'll be talking about that course. And they also have generously offered a discount on the soil advocacy course. So I'll put that in the follow-up email tomorrow too. And they're willing to raffle off 100% of course for free. So we'll figure out how we propose that to all the audience here today as well too. But that's awesome.
Yay. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's really amazing. The soil advocacy training is extraordinary, and you really leave it fired up, empowered, and inspired. Unlike, so I just highly encourage everybody to become a soil advocate.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Super exciting.
We should do that at the Oregon Wine Symposium, Janie.
We should. We should. It's amazing. Well, I think
an entire industry of soil advocates.
It'd be awesome. We should probably wrap up and go to the lounges, and all of the questions that we didn't answer, we'll do what we've done in previous Beyond Brookses. We'll put together a little Google Doc between the three of us and get everything answered, and it will come out in the email that has the recording and the discount for this class, for the soil advocacy training, as well as a big thank you. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Bree. This has been a delight, a high delight. Thank you.
Huge thank you. I mean, I just am like, my brain is spinning, Ryland. I'm so excited about what else we can do.
I mean, the fact, that whole connection around policy and National Wine Council, or I don't, that was the term, but,
Wine America. Yeah.
Yes.
And engaging that as part of the coalition, it sounds very, very exciting. And
well, we have a team that's boots on the ground in DC, and that's all they do. So it's great. They have great connections with all the staffers. And like I said, we do stuff with the Farm Bill every year because it obviously affects our vineyards. So it's an important part of what we do from a policy standpoint back in DC. So that'll be great. That'll be great. And with that, I'm going to thank both you, Bree and Ryland. It's just such a pleasure. So fun. Bree, I know you're as excited as I am. This is the stuff we live for, this kind of energy and inspiration. And we're lucky that we came up with this idea and we get to do it, for our jobs. Thank you to you both. And we'll see you in the lounges.
Beautiful.
Yes. And then I'm just going to finish up with a couple of things. Our next event, so the last two Beyond Brookses for this season are going to be cooking demonstrations with two very amazing people. The one in May is with Chef Elizabeth Faulkner. She's a celebrity chef. She's been on Top Chef. She's really cool. She's come out to Brooks and done a dinner. There's going to be a cooking demonstration that you can either cook along or not cook along, but your box is going to include the wines that she selected, as well as a lot of the spices that are going to be used in the dishes, so that you don't have to go purchase those on your own. And then we're going to spend 2 hours with Elizabeth. We have her blocked off for 2 hours. She will actually be at Brooks when she does her cooking demo. So, it's the day before Mother's Day. Amazing Mother's Day gift, but we're really excited to welcome her back to Brooks. And then the one in June, we're going to go from vegetarian to cooking steaks with Jordan McKay. So those both should be great. And just I want to make another big thank you to Ryland and to his whole crew. Really, I've been working with a lot of people from Kiss the Ground over the last couple of years. They're deep, true, honest, inspiring partners. And it's just been such an amazing part of the work that I get to do at Brooks, to be able to partner with people like that and what they're doing. So I'm super excited. So thank you again, Ryland, for an amazing presentation and for all of your time. I will follow up with everybody in the next couple of days once we get the answers to the questions with the regular email. And it's time to head to the lounges. So as Bree mentioned, there are 3 that are set up. There is one for me, one for Bree, and one for Ryland. We will open the doors as soon as I get off the stage, and they'll be open for an hour. So come and bring your wine and bring your questions, and we can't wait to see you. So thank you again for being here, everybody. Cheers.